Hello! I've cut and prepped my pieces. I'm doing a bi-colour version, so normally if this was cut in one piece they would be joined along here, but I have cut. So normally there's a slash line that is cut to a dot on the pattern, but for the bi-colour version you just cut all the way. But other than that, I don't need to treat it any differently to if it was one piece. So as you can see, I've marked all the right side markings with thread and I've marked the wrong side markings with chalk. And the first thing I'm going to be doing is pressing everything. So when it comes to the right side markings, it's going to be a case of pressing it wrong sides together. And then on the other side, I will repeat that and press wrong sides together, stopping at the dot. And on the wrong side, I will press those lines right sides together. So for your standard pleat, there are 4 lines. 2 of them are right side markings and 2 of them are wrong side markings. And it'll become quite obvious to you how these are meant to be pressed. So you will be able to tell you're doing it right if you imagine how that's going to look. You'll see that it will end up lining up. And then right at the top here is the exception. These ones at the top are a little bit different. At the top here, this facing becomes part of the pleat. So this one doesn't have the top line. It just goes straight over here. It doesn't have the 4th line at the top. It'll just be pressed on the 3rd line to the wrong side. So the ones at the top are basically partial pleats, but if you just follow the pressing guidelines, it will work out. Okay, I've pressed them, and I'm just going to go through each pleat in turn to make sure you know which way the lines are going to be pressed. So I've got the bottom left one made up of 4 lines. The outer 2 lines are going to be pressed right sides together. The inner 2 lines are going to be pressed wrong sides together, and just press them one at a time. The second pleat is exactly the same. Press up to the dot and do each of them one at a time. And now we're up to the top left pleat. That's a little bit different. We've only got 3 lines to press here because we've got the integrated facing. So again, the bottom line here is on the wrong side, so that's going to be pressed right sides together. The next line up is going to be pressed wrong sides together, and then there's only 1 more line to press instead of 2. So it's just the one up the top, and that's going to be wrong sides together. And you can see when you fold it all up, and the facing is on the wrong side, you can see that it lines up correctly at the corner. On the other side, we're going to do the same thing, so the bottom right pleat is just the same as the bottom left pleat. So we've got 4 lines. Bottom one is going to be pressed right sides together. The inner ones are going to be pressed wrong sides together. The second one up is the same thing again. And when we get to the top right pleat, it's going to be the same scenario as on the left. We only have 3 lines to press. The bottom one is marked on the wrong side and it's pressed right sides together. The next one is marked on the right side and it's pressed wrong sides together. And then we just have the top one remaining, which is going to be pressed wrong sides together. Okay, so we're ready to do our first little bit of sewing. And just a note, I've just pinned these 2 colours together here just to simulate what this would look like if it was a whole pattern piece. Even though you don't need to do that if you're working with the bi-colour one, but it might help you keep it aligned. So our first line of stitching we're going to be bringing these wrong sides together to match this short line here with the other short line. So if you imagine a line that's in between the middle of these two right side lines, we're going to be folding it along that wrong sides together. So if you match these two fold lines, that's gonna leave you with these two lines sitting on top of each other. So I'm going to put some pins in here with them matched. Here they are matched up. So you can see these lines on top of each other. We're going to stitch from here to here. So what that's going to do when it's folded is it's just going to secure the facing down. And it's securing the pleat to sit nicely. So now that we have that secured, our next step is going to be matching these two lines. So you can already see how that wants to fold back into place. So what we're going to be doing is matching these up right sides together, and we're just going to go as far as we can because that previous line of stitching is going to block us. So we're just going to get close to it as far as you can without straining. And since you've already got those lines pressed in there, it's pretty easy to know where to go. So there it is all lined up. That's how it will look. We've got that little pocket in there. And you'll know you've done it correctly when this line goes up in a continuous line. So now that we've got that nicely aligned, we're going to stitch the base. So I'm going to pull that facing out of the way, and we're just going to stitch close to the raw edge here to secure the base of the pleat. Okay, so now again, as we sew, we're going to leave this facing out of the way, and now I'm going to take this pin out. This was just a visual representation of where they're going to be joined, but they actually are going to be abutted like this. So what we're going to do now is take it and fold it right sides together along the edge. So these will line up perfectly. So this is where two raw edges are, and this would be a fold line if you're cutting it all in one piece. So what we're going to do is make sure, for one, this facing is out of the way here. And we're going to match to this line here. And you'll see you've folded it correctly when the raw edge travels up this pre-pressed fold line. And we're going to match these lines on top of each other and secure along this line. So here I have folded this and matched this line here, and I've put some pins in here. So you'll see these are matched up, but instead of actually having it sewn all the way up to the edge like this pin line, I actually like to sew 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch away from this match line. And what that does is give it a little bit of play to the pleat. You'll see when I sew it. And of course, again a reminder, don't catch the facing. So I'm folding it up and out of the way before I sew any of this. And instead of sewing it from this side, I'm going to flip the whole thing and sew it from the other side. You can still see the line marked here, and I will take out that wee pin now. So this here is the line that's being matched, and I'm going to sew 1.5 centimeters or 5/8 of an inch away from here. So there I am sewing it. When I take out the pins and let it fold, you'll see what's happened here. So the two lines sit on top of each other, but by stitching a little bit away, they're allowed to flap open a bit. And again, I have not caught the facing. So just a little tweak I did after this was I just extended my existing line that I've just sewn, and I just extended it up by 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch on the same trajectory, folding everything out of the way carefully, and just going a little bit further this time because I wanted it joined a little bit further up. And that's just going to join them a little bit further. So now when I turn it, I will show you the full effect of that. So there it is. You can see how it wants to fold up to the top, and that's starting to look very nice. Next, we're going to be sewing these two short lines together. So we're going to be folding wrong sides together. And this line is going to be visible on the wrong side. It's going to be just like the other side of the facing. So if you need to change your thread color, if you're doing a bi-color version, now's the time to do that. Right, so I've got these markings lined up, wrong sides together, and of course I'm going to make sure everything else is folded out of the way, so I'm only catching this side. Alright, there we have it. You can see how that line of stitching is visible on the inside, and how these top two pleats are formed. And that's the trickiest part done, honestly. So, alright, so this applies to the bi-color version here, is that I've pinned it where it will be a fold line for a single color one, but I'm now going to sew that together. So I'm just going to start at this fold line here and go to the bottom, matching those raw edges. And this will all be hidden inside the bag by the end. So now it's exactly the same as the single color one, and we can just treat it the same. And now that we've got these top two pleats, you can see that this line is starting to form. So I'm going to match this. So here's a tricky little bit you need to keep in mind. See this inner corner? Do not match it to the long edge, match it to the inner corner here, which is where it must line up. Not here, here. So now we can fold all of this into place, and I've pinned it across here, and we're going to tack across here. But of course, making sure that I've pulled the facing out of the way. Right, there it is. It's looking good. Facing is free, so that's looking good. So, before I do any folding, I'm going to trim off about 2 millimeters off here. And what that does is it gets the bulk out of this area where it's going to be folded. Because even though it matches perfectly, it's fabric and it does add that little bit of bulk to the fold area. And I want it to marry up super nicely. So just trimming off a few millimeters here increases the precision of our folding. Okay, so now we're ready to sew the next pleat. So you can see here on the lilac, this is a raw edge, and we're going to enclose that raw edge with our pleat. So we're going to fold this along our pre-press line, right sides together, and we're going to sew along here. And that's going to enclose the raw edge. So the easiest way to do that is if we flip it, because then you can see your previous line of stitching. So we're going to flip it and use that side as a reference. We've got our pre-pressed line to work from, and I'm just going to go along that line, and I'm going to go just past the existing line of stitching that's already there. And when I get to the end, I'm going to pivot off at a 90-degree angle. So when you open it back up and have a look, you'll see that line of stitching has totally enclosed that raw edge. Now that we've sewn this seam, we're going to do an extra little bit of stitching up here that's going to secure above this area and secure the pleat in place. So we've got a marking here to show where our stitching will stop. So there's still going to be a little bit loose up to the top. So that will be marked here. We're going to fold it wrong sides together. Here I've pinned it. And you can see here that we can't quite go all the way to the previous line of stitching because it'll get in the way. So I'm just trying to get close as far as it wants to go without straining it. So now that I've done that, you can see that it's only ended up being about 2 centimeters long, 3/4 of an inch. So I could have gone further, but I didn't really feel a need to. So you can see now that's been joined, and it's still open below that, and that's just going to keep the tip of the pleat in place. And that's looking pretty cool. And of course I've kept the facing out of the way. So here I am folding the base of the pleat into place. You can see I've pinned it. And I'm going to secure it in place by stitching a few millimeters away from the edge. Make sure the facing isn't caught, but it's okay to sew through this whole piece underneath because that's just part of the pleated configuration. And you'll know you're doing it right when all of those lines are lining up and everything's sitting nicely on top of itself. So there you are, secured at the base. The facing is free, I have not caught that. And this is all lined up nicely, and it has that 1 centimeter offset. Okay, so just like last time, I'm going to trim off some of these layers of bulk that's going to get in the way. So now we're going to fold along this line, right sides together, and it's just like the other ones. You want these raw edges to line up. So just like last time, we want to enclose these raw edges by stitching just past them. And there you can see that I'm going to be stitching through all the layers. And I'm stitching 4 millimeters away as per usual and pivoting off. And there you can see that raw edge is enclosed by that line of stitching. Right, so now I'm ready to sew this line, same as usual. I've got my markings here. Got that line matched up and I've got it pinned. I've got my dot marking for where to stop. And I'm going to get as close as I can to that previous line of stitching but I won't be able to go all the way. So again, I'm just going down as far as is comfortable, and I'm going to fold everything else out of the way, so I'm only working through these 2 layers, nothing more. So there's the line of stitching. As you can see, it stops before it starts getting into that little channel configuration created by my previous line of stitching. Facing check. And now we're going to fold the base with everything lined up along those lines. The notch in the center lines up with the center of the pleat. And again, I'm just going to stitch 4mm from the edge to secure that in place. And that's our next pleat complete. Right, so of course the next step is to do our little trim. And then again, we're going to do our fold right sides together. And we're going to secure along here. Again, I'm flipping it so I can view my previous line of stitching. Just make sure those raw edges are lined up. Okay, so now we see our raw edges are totally enclosed by that line of stitching, and we're going to be folding across the base. I'm going to tack across the base, and then I'm going to tack the top. Okay, so I've got my pins ready. Just the same as usual, I'm going to be starting at the dot and going as far as I can. Don't feel too much pressure to get very close to your previous line of stitching. This is just a nice little tack to keep it in shape. And then I'm going to be going across the base. So I'm going to go and I'm going to pivot upwards. So pivoting at that little corner and traveling upwards. The next step is, as usual, trimming. I'm just trimming through those top layers and leaving the base. Okay, now we've just got to do our next one as per usual. We're going to fold right sides together along that line. And we're not going to have to go very far here because there's not very much raw edge. So we're only going to have to go up to where that raw edge finishes. So I'm just using a pin here to indicate that. You don't have to be super precise about where it ends, just make sure you go past that raw edge and then pivot off like the rest of the pleats. So there you see, I've got the raw edge enclosed, and then we're onto the final pleat. Right, so as per usual, I have married up these 2 outer lines. I've folded them wrong sides together with the dot marking matched. And this time our stitching line is going to be quite long because the other pleat is so close to the base. So there they are, stitched. And you can see again that little pocket where I've stopped away from that little line. And now we can fold it in place. So now we just need to secure across the base. The final seam of this bag will be a 1 centimeter seam. So I'm going to sew just under 1 centimeter. I'm going to sew about 8 millimeters away from the raw edge. And that way I can trim that bulk and make sure it's perfectly aligned. It should be nice and flush with all of those lines. And there we have it. There's the back. Everything marries up. And there's the front looking absolutely insane. So yeah, I hope you're proud. The hardest bit is out of the way. And now we can move on. Well done.